He thought he'd cut a cost. What he actually did was light a fuse. My name is Mark Talley. I'm 59 years old. I live in New Jersey, not far from where I grew up. And I've spent the last 2 decades as the facilities and operations director for a national logistics company, the kind of place where trucks never stop moving and things fall apart if you don't stay 10 steps ahead. The first time I met Kyle Brenner, he didn't say hello, didn't stand up, didn't offer his hand, just glanced at a spreadsheet and muttered, "You're overpaid for what you do." That was it. I'd been called into his office for a brief introductory meeting. It was supposed to be our first one-on-one. The guy had only been in the building for 3 days. I was ready to run through department metrics, review current contracts, maybe even walk him through the 30-year-old boiler I'd just gotten recertified for another 2 years. Instead, I stood there like some fool who'd wandered into a job interview he didn't know he was losing. I nodded, thanked him, walked out. I didn't protest, didn't explain my budget savings from last quarter, didn't mention the 75 vendors I'd vetted, hired, trained, and managed for over 2 decades. I saw it in his eyes. He didn't see a man. He saw a line item, a dinosaur. Kyle was 36, full of buzzwords and MBA arrogance. Efficiency is attitude, he'd told the team at the last town hall. We don't want maintainers, we want builders. What a joke. He didn't know what it meant to keep things running, didn't know how many thousands of ways a building could fail. He didn't know what a glycol valve was, or why we needed to upgrade our fire panel this fiscal year instead of next. He didn't even know where the main water shutoff was. But I did. I knew every fuse, every vendor, every spec in every file. I'd been through 3 floods, 2 CEO transitions, and a ransomware attack that nearly shut us down in 2012. I'd slept in this building during snowstorms to make sure the dock stayed operational. I'd trained interns who went on to become directors. But none of that mattered to Kyle. To him, I was a cost center. Nothing more, and the worst part, I hadn't even been surprised, just disappointed in myself for not seeing it coming sooner. I'd grown comfortable, thought I was safe because the building ran like a watch. But Kyle wasn't looking for stability. He was looking for scalps, and I had just become his next trophy. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed in 1,000 years, was that this quiet, gray-haired facilities guy, I wasn't broken, I was building. And that moment, that little spreadsheet insult, it gave me something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. They thought I was being quiet because I was beaten. I was quiet because I was building. It was the following Monday. I'd just gotten back from a job site across town, a roof inspection and a vendor dispute about thermal coating specs, the usual Monday scramble. I walked into our floor, badge still clipped to my collar, sun still on my neck, and stopped cold. There was someone sitting at my desk, a kid, maybe mid-20s, slim, hoodie, looked like he just wandered out of a college computer lab. He was clicking around on one of my dual monitors like he'd been there all morning. I waited a few seconds just to give him the chance to notice he was somewhere he didn't belong. He didn't even glance up. I cleared my throat. "Hey there, can I help you?" He finally looked up, grinned like we were old buddies, and said, "Oh, you must be Mark. Didn't they tell you? I'm Ben. I'm the new project coordinator. Kyle wants me closer to his office, so he gave me this spot." This spot, he meant my desk. The same desk I'd used for over 20 years. The one with the scratched edge where I used to stack paper drawings before we went digital. The one with the backup drive locked in the bottom drawer, where I kept 30 years of schematics, vendor agreements, and maintenance logs. I stared at him for a second too long. "Got it," I said. Then I turned and walked away. There wasn't a meeting, no conversation, no courtesy heads up. I wasn't consulted. I was evicted. They moved me into a room that used to be a janitor's closet. No windows, a folding table for a desk, broken thermostat that ran 10 degrees too hot in the morning and 10 degrees too cold by 3 p.m. The Wi-Fi barely reached the corner I was stuffed into. It smelled faintly like mop water and drywall. Ben kept my seat, my monitors, my chair with the back tilt. I'd fixed myself, and my calendar, that changed too. Facility lifecycle planning and vendor contract reviews vanished. Suddenly, I was fielding toner refill requests and logging pest control complaints from satellite offices. It was petty, calculated, death by 1,000 paper cuts. I didn't say a word. Ben, meanwhile, started shadowing me like some overeager intern. He claimed it was to learn the ropes, but it wasn't hard to see what he was really doing. He sat in on vendor calls and took screenshots of my dashboards. He asked weirdly specific questions about maintenance check-ins, and then tried to replicate them in spreadsheets that didn't make sense. He printed out the emergency lockout procedures, the ones I wrote, and labeled them with his initials. One afternoon, I caught him flipping through one of my facility rotation logs, the old one, from 2013. That thing hadn't left my drawer in 8 years. I said nothing, just watched. It was sloppy, it was fast, and it was obvious. Kyle wasn't firing me. He was phasing me out. Ben wasn't here to assist me. He was here to replace me. So, I did what any dinosaur with a steel spine and a memory like a vault would do. I got to work. Every file I'd ever authored, backed up. Every access log, override code, and audit trail, logged and downloaded. Every physical document in the old archive room, I scanned it to my private drive and copied it to an encrypted stick I kept in my car. I exported our full equipment lifecycle matrix and air-gapped a backup of our building automation system, the one only I knew how to reset. And when Kyle, in his infinite genius, gave Ben admin credentials to our maintenance management platform, the same one I'd locked down over 15 years with strict access tiers and multi-layer fail-safes, that's when I knew I had them. They handed a 24-year-old intern the digital keys to the facility kingdom, without a single clue what he was opening. I didn't get mad, I didn't call HR, I didn't even push back. I just smiled, turned off my heater, and kept backing things up, because they thought silence meant surrender. But I'd just opened a new chapter, and Kyle, he didn't even know he'd already lost. All I needed now was one final insult to justify pulling the lever. I started coming in earlier. Not 5 minutes early, hours, before the lights clicked on in the front office, before the front desk manager shuffled in with her coffee and gossip, before Kyle's favorite phrase, high-level visibility, ever hit a meeting invite. I'd roll in before 6, badge through the dock entrance, and take the back stairwell up to the archives room. No one ever went in there anymore. Not since Kyle started calling physical documents legacy clutter. But I knew exactly what it held. Over 2 decades of vendor files, permits, blueprints, risk assessments, and every paper-based safety audit we'd ever filed. While Ben sat at my old desk fiddling with KPI dashboards he didn't understand, I was reviewing mold abatement reports from 2008. While he sent out typo-ridden emails to contractors asking about electricity certification, I was sifting through the original HVAC zoning plans and rescanning them into an encrypted drive. I wasn't stashing documents out of spite. I was preserving the foundation and pulling my copy before Kyle buried it. By the second week, I had recreated complete offline versions of our fire suppression inspection records, utility consumption maps, security system vendor rotation schedules, emergency communication protocols, and about 100 more things that nobody else even knew existed. Not because I kept them secret, but because no one ever asked. I moved on to the building automation system next. The core of it, HVAC, lighting, alarms, pressure thresholds, was all tied to a custom interface I'd designed years ago, with a rollback protocol we'd built for hurricane outages. We'd never had to use it, but I always kept it updated, quietly, privately. I didn't touch it, not yet, but I reprogrammed the dual authentication key sequence and reset one of the tokens, mine, to my encrypted backup vault. Meanwhile, Kyle was busy renaming departments. One day I overheard him pitch something called the Ops Acceleration Pod. No one knew what it meant, but it sounded impressive, so it stuck. A week later, the janitorial department became the Environmental Synergy Team. The warehouse maintenance crew was renamed Infrastructure Velocity. No one laughed, they were too scared to. Ben, now emboldened with his title and badge swipe access, had taken it upon himself to modernize our inventory system. He proudly announced he was removing redundant alerts from the maintenance queue. I watched him disable half of the low-pressure triggers tied to our backup water pumps without even realizing what they did. I didn't correct him. Instead, I made a duplicate copy of the original schema before he touched anything and stored it on a hard drive I kept in my truck. Every day I collected more, not because I was trying to burn the place down, but because I knew what was coming. This wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. I'd seen this movie before. New leadership comes in, ignores the groundwork, cuts the foundation, and then acts shocked when the whole thing crumbles. The only thing I hadn't decided was when I'd walk. That moment, the final insult, the thing I needed to justify flipping the switch, I figured that was still weeks away. Maybe a quarter. Maybe Kyle would try to demote me publicly. Maybe they'd reassign me to fleet maintenance and call it right-sizing. But then it came faster than I ever expected, and it came in front of the entire company. But that's scene 4. For now, I kept scanning, kept documenting, because no one asked what I was doing. No one thought I was a threat. They thought I was fading. I wasn't fading. I was staging. And the fuse they lit? It was nearly ready. Kyle thought it was the end of my usefulness. It was actually the start of his countdown. They packed us into the atrium like cattle. No agenda, no meeting title, just a calendar invite titled, "All Hands Mandatory Attendance." Middle of the week, right after lunch. People came carrying half-eaten sandwiches, sloshing coffee, still in vests and steel-toe boots. Even the remote leads were logged into the projector screen up front, muted and blinking on the big TV like confused spectators. Kyle stood there with his sleeves rolled up, a Sharpie in his hand, scribbling nonsense words on a whiteboard behind him. Efficiency, agility, resource realignment. I stood in the back, arms folded. I already knew what was coming. He cleared his throat and smiled like a man who'd practiced in front of a mirror. Thanks for joining on such short notice. I know these surprise meetings can be a little unsettling, but transparency is key. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off. He said it like he was announcing a dress code change, like we were about to hear that Taco Tuesday was getting pushed to Friday. This will be Mark's final week with us. Just like that. No build-up. No reason. Not even the dignity of calling it a retirement or a transition. I saw heads turn toward me, some in confusion, a few in sympathy, but most looked down at their feet, like they'd just heard a stranger got hit by a bus and didn't want to seem nosy. Kyle went on, talking about organizational reshuffling and evolution of departmental structure, but no one was listening. Not really. They were just trying to calculate how close they were to the blast radius. And me, I stood there, still, quiet, cold inside. No handshake, no thank you. Not even a damn cupcake. 21 years, gone in a line and a shrug. I looked around, saw people I'd trained during fire drills, people whose paychecks I'd protected when their time cards glitched. One guy I'd pulled out of a stairwell during a power outage when the elevator went down. He stared at the floor like he didn't know me. That's when it hit me. Not sadness, not anger, relief. Because in that moment, I realized I didn't need to carry any of it anymore. The broken systems, the Band-Aid budgets, the silence, the weight of holding it all together while people like Kyle played Lego blocks with human lives. I nodded once, just once, said, "Take care," and walked out of the room with nothing but my badge, my backup drive, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who had already written the next chapter, before the first one even closed. I didn't cry in the car. I cried later. That night, in the garage, when it was dark and still and nobody could see me. Not because I was humiliated, but because I was finally free. They thought removing me would make the place run leaner, but I wasn't just a man. I was ballast. You don't feel the loss of ballast right away. You feel it when the whole thing starts to tip. And Kyle, he just pulled out the last steadying weight. The clock had started, and he didn't even hear it ticking. Kyle called it a system bug. It wasn't. The system was fine. It just didn't belong to him anymore. 2 days after I walked out of that building with a polite nod and zero fanfare, I sat on my back porch, sipped my coffee, and opened the old laptop I'd wiped and reloaded for this exact moment. Then I keyed in the protocol I'd built for hurricane contingencies. We'd never used it. Now we would. It wasn't dramatic. No explosions, no alarms. Just a quiet, slow shifting of weight, like pulling a cinder block out from the bottom of a tower. Everything still looked upright for a second, But the balance was gone. The first crack came that afternoon. I got a text from a friend in facilities. "Hey, do you know why the HVAC maintenance logs are inaccessible? Says access denied, even with admin creds." A few hours later, another. "Payroll system just locked up. Random badge errors too. Whole security teams locked out of the badge scheduling tool." By day 3, it got worse. The intranet crashed every time someone tried to update facility schedules. Critical access points flagged red despite being physically fine. Kyle kept blaming it on post-realignment system load, whatever the hell that meant. Ben, from what I heard, tried rebooting one of the failover scripts. He accidentally disabled the pressure sensors on the backup water pumps. That's when it finally hit them. They didn't have a map. They were sitting in the cockpit without a flight manual. What they didn't know, what Kyle couldn't have imagined in his worst, most insecure dream, was that I'd disabled every admin override I had ever built. Not maliciously, not illegally, just quietly, one by one, all legal, all documented, all reversible, but only by dual authentication. And one of those keys, it lived on a token I pulled from the system the day I turned in my badge. See, I never designed those systems with job security in mind. I built them to withstand natural disasters, data breaches, and full-on infrastructure meltdowns. That's what good ops people do. We think 10 moves ahead because no one else will. But what I hadn't expected, what Kyle never considered, was that firing the guy who was the continuity plan meant the continuity plan walked out the door. And then, just when they thought it couldn't get worse, the resignations started. Not the usual churn, not entry-level attrition. I'm talking about the core. The HVAC lead I'd worked with for 18 years, gone. The networked systems analyst who built the badge schedule rules, left. The janitorial foreman, who Kyle never even bothered to meet, turned in his badge and left a note that just said, "Ask Mark how to clean a boiler flue." Within 5 business days, 10 people were gone. Not protesting, not angry, just gone. Each one had already texted me. Each one already had a path forward, somewhere else. They were my people, my techs, my planners, my contractors, my schedulers. Kyle never shook their hands, never asked what they did, never learned their names, but they knew mine, and when I left, they didn't panic. They packed up and followed. Kyle thought he was running lean, but lean without backbone is just collapse in slow motion. I watched it happen from my porch. No bitterness, no vindication, just silence, just the steady unraveling of a system built to last, but not built to serve fools. But Kyle still hadn't figured out what had happened, because by the time the dust settled, I was already gone, and already winning. 6 months before the layoff, I'd gotten a call from a guy named Jeff Haynes at Iron Ridge Services, mid-sized facilities and logistics firm, solid reputation, no nonsense culture. He wanted me to consult, just a few hours a week to audit their vendor lifecycle and equipment modernization plan. I'd said no at the time. I was still loyal, still had my boots on the ground, still believed I'd retire quietly from the place I'd helped keep running for 2 decades. But I didn't delete his number, delete his. The night after the soft collapse started, while badge readers failed and HVAC zones froze over, and poor Ben tried to reboot building access with a disconnected credential map, I sent Jeff a message. "You still need help? I'm available now. Got blueprints and people." He replied within 10 minutes. "When can you start?" I showed up the following week, walked into their office like I was stepping out of a storm and into sunlight. They handed me a blank slate, no red tape, no posturing, just a simple ask, build it right. So I did. I brought more than knowledge. I brought structure, systems, documentation, everything Kyle had ignored, everything Ben had butchered, everything I'd preserved in silence, processes for real-time maintenance tracking, templates for lifecycle planning. A vendor matrix built on relationship equity, not cheapest bids. I also brought my people, not with poaching, not with promises, but with quiet trust, the kind you can't fake and can't replace. They came one by one, my HVAC lead, then our lead scheduler, the guy who rebuilt our fire panel interface back in 2016, the warehouse systems specialist. By month's end, we'd assembled a new backbone, leaner, smarter, faster. Iron Ridge didn't just welcome us, they let us lead. 3 weeks in, Jeff pulled me aside. Hey, we're going after one of your old firm's contracts, the Metro Logistics Hub. Think your team's up for it? I almost laughed. Not only were we up for it, we'd built it. We took that contract, then another, then one more. Within 6 weeks, Iron Ridge had secured 3 of their largest regional maintenance deals, all ones I had helped establish, negotiate, and maintain for years. All ones Kyle never took the time to understand. And he still hadn't connected the dots. He was too busy holding resilience workshops and trying to gamify operations metrics to realize that his foundation had been ripped out from underneath him, brick by brick, person by person, contract by contract. And then came the kicker. Jeff walked into my office one morning, holding a manila folder. Good news, we're acquiring their property services division, full asset integration. Transition begins next quarter. I blinked. You want me to oversee it? I asked, already knowing the answer. He smiled. No, I want you to run it. So I did. I wrote the integration plan, I coordinated the vendor transfer, I drafted the onboarding sequence and reviewed every asset register line by line. Kyle still hadn't figured out what happened. Not yet. But soon, he'd be sitting across from me, and I'd be the one with the clipboard, the chair at the head of the table, and the welcome speech, because I hadn't just walked out the door. I walked through it, and into something better. And the people who came with me, they weren't following a title, they were following trust. And just when it seemed he couldn't fall further, he did. 3 weeks after Kyle fired me, I walked into a conference room at Iron Ridge, floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh coffee, a stack of integration packets in the center of the table. At the far end sat Kyle Brenner, not at the head of the table, not even close. He was seated halfway down, a company-issued notepad in front of him, chewing the cap of a ballpoint pen like a student about to fail a quiz he didn't study for. He looked up when the door opened. His eyes landed on me. He froze. The pen dropped from his mouth. I didn't say anything right away. Just walked in, calm, slow, steady. I set my folder down, flipped it open, and made eye contact with the room before speaking. Welcome to the integration planning meeting, Mr. Brenner. The silence that followed was almost polite. The kind of pause you get right before everyone realizes a power shift has already happened, and nobody told them. Kyle tried to recover. I haven't had a chance to review the packet yet. He trailed off, eyes flicking to the Iron Ridge team seated around the table. No one bailed him out. I smiled, small, restrained. The kind you give a man standing in quicksand with a bucket of water. That's okay, I said. I wrote it. Across the room, Jeff gave me a slight nod. He didn't need to say anything. Everyone here knew why I was leading this. Kyle wasn't in charge. He was the product. And the terms of his transition had already been signed. Ben wasn't in the room. Someone had mentioned he was let go after an access breach caused a minor fire suppression failure. Classic gave the intern root privileges and acted shocked when the sprinkler system mistook a software update for a gas leak. Kyle looked like a man trying to remember what dignity tasted like. Someone asked a question about infrastructure handoffs, timelines, procedures, which vendor accounts were retained. I answered cleanly. Page 8 of the packet. Kyle scribbled something and nodded like he understood. He didn't. Another question. Badge access integration across properties. I explained the dual auth requirement. Kyle blinked and wrote dual auth next to a doodle on his notes. By the end of the hour, it was obvious to everyone. Kyle had no idea what was happening. He wasn't driving anything. He was riding in the back seat, clutching a map that didn't matter anymore. And then, in the final 5 minutes, Jeff cleared his throat. Just so everyone's aligned, he said, Kyle will be working remotely during the transition. We've assigned him to the Cedar Rapids field office to support training and rollout. Cedar Rapids to Iowa. Kyle flinched like someone had just told him the Wi-Fi didn't work out there. And the real cherry, out there he'll report to Natalie Hughes, Jeff added. She's been with us 8 years, smart, logistics specialist, runs a tight ship. 28 years old, degree in systems operations, grew up on a farm, zero tolerance for people who mistake charisma for competence. Kyle didn't speak, he just nodded, eyes unfocused, probably calculating how far Iowa was from his downtown condo. and his 3 times a week hot yoga instructor. I close my folder. That wraps my section. We'll send an updated timeline by end of day. Thank you all. As I stood, a few people nodded. One even clapped quietly. Kyle stayed seated, scribbling nothing into his notepad, pretending to read a page he hadn't touched. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I just sat across from the man who tried to erase me and watched him shrink inside the machine he used to think he controlled. He called it realignment. I called it gravity. And he'd finally found rock bottom. I wasn't climbing, I was building the scaffolding for others. Integration wrapped 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no confetti. I just emailed the final report and closed my laptop, quietly, like it was just another Tuesday. But I could feel it, a shift in the building. People started walking straighter, meetings got shorter, problems got solved without a dozen replies. You could hear more laughing in the hallway, less fake urgency in the conference rooms. The place worked again. It breathed again. And me? I became the VP of Operations and People Infrastructure. Not because I wanted the title, because it made sense. I didn't lobby for it, didn't schmooze or flash a resume. I just showed up, solved problems, gave people what they needed. A printer that worked, a policy that made sense, a little trust. Iron Ridge didn't need a rock star. They needed a cornerstone. So that's what I became. I started holding open-door mentorship hours every Friday. No appointments, no dress code, just a quiet space in the back of my office with a sign that read, "Thinking about quitting, come talk instead." And they came. Mid-career engineers burnt out from being overlooked. Older maintenance leads worried they were aging out of relevance. Tech specialists who felt invisible until a system crashed and suddenly they were the emergency. I didn't promise promotions or magic solutions. I listened, asked questions, connected dots. And behind the scenes, I built something new, something I wish I'd had 20 years earlier, a program called Steal Second. It wasn't flashy, no TED Talks, no branded merch. Just a quiet initiative to give men over 45, especially those laid off or forced out, a path back into leadership. We offered shadowing placements, reverse mentorship with younger leads, resume rewrites with no fluff, just facts, honest workshops on how to walk into a room and own your worth again. I funded the pilot from my own bonus. By the 3rd month, we had a dozen participants, one of them a former shift supervisor who hadn't worked in 2 years after a round of realignments. Another was a guy who used to manage an entire warehouse team before his role was offshored. Now, he leads our facilities performance review team. People noticed, but I didn't brag, didn't take credit. I just led, because I wasn't interested in climbing anymore. I'd done that already. I knew where the ladder went, and what happened when someone kicked it out from under you. Now, I was focused on building better ladders, stronger ones other people could climb, ones that didn't break just because someone forgot your name. One afternoon, a young guy in IT, maybe 26, poked his head into my office during lunch. "Hey Mark, mind if I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, motioning him in. He looked around, a little awkward. "Do you ever, think about retiring?" I chuckled, closed my sandwich and leaned back. "Not until my work can outlast me." He nodded, smiled, and I could see it, that flicker of respect. Not because I was a boss, not because I had a title, but because he understood. I wasn't chasing the top. I was making sure the next guy didn't fall off the middle rung, full circle, I guess. Kyle tried to erase me. Instead, I built something permanent, and every time someone walks into that mentorship room unsure of their worth, I get to watch a man find his footing again. That's legacy, and it's just getting started. Sometimes people don't change. They just break quietly, where no one's watching. It was a Thursday morning, one of those quiet gray ones where the whole building seems to move a little slower. I just finished a meeting about expanding Steel Second to another region, and I ducked into the break room to refill my coffee. That's when I saw him, Kyle Brenner, standing near the window, holding a paper cup like it might give him an answer. The guy who once told me I was overpaid for what I did, who called me a cost, not a person. the same man who had rebranded departments instead of learning how they worked. He looked thinner, suit a little looser, hair slightly overgrown, like maybe he didn't care enough to fix it anymore. His eyes didn't move when I walked in, but mine did. I went straight for the pot, poured my coffee, gave it a stir. He turned then. "Mark," he said quietly. I nodded. "Kyle." He shifted his weight. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the counter. "Sure." Long pause. He stared down into his cup like it might help him explain. "I didn't see it," he finally said. "I thought you were just a lifer, a name on a spreadsheet." I didn't respond. Let the words hang there a second. He kept going, like he needed to unload it before he lost his nerve. I looked at numbers, not people. I thought performance was about output, not ownership. I didn't ask questions. I just assumed. I sipped my coffee. "Yeah," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't ask." He nodded slowly. His face was stiff, like the words tasted wrong in his mouth. I was wrong. I know that now. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." And I believed him, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Low, quiet, like someone who'd spent the last 6 months sitting inside the ruins of his own arrogance. I nodded once. "I accept it." He looked almost surprised. "Just like that?" "Sure," I said. "I don't need an enemy, and I don't carry grudges." He looked away. "I think you do carry things, though." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, just not the things people expect." We stood in silence for a while, just two men in a break room neither of us owned, sipping from paper cups, surrounded by a world we both used to think we understood. Then I pushed off the counter. "Take care, Kyle." "You too, Mark." I walked out. A week later, the board quietly announced Kyle's mutual separation. No emails, no fanfare, just a passing mention in a department update, and a new interim leader posted that afternoon. But we all knew. Kyle hadn't been fired. He'd been removed, surgically, gently, like a splinter. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Sometimes people don't crash and burn. They just run out of ways to fake it, and one morning they look up and the hallway is empty, because no one's following anymore. Kyle didn't learn the lesson in time, but I did. Leadership isn't about how loud you talk. It's about who still listens when you're quiet. And when I passed his empty desk that afternoon, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something else. Closure.